Hello and welcome to End Goals, an LCMS Youth Ministry podcast. I'm host Reverend Mark Kiesling, and I'm with DCE Julianna Schultz. We are here to bring parents, church workers, and lay leaders discussions and resources to help your youth ministry meet its end goal, which is young people who are disciples of Jesus Christ for life. Today we're going to talk about how to communicate with youth and parents.
We know that there are many youth leaders out there who love youth and their families, but maybe don't have a lot of resources or support. So maybe you just accepted the nomination to be on your youth board. Thank you for doing that. Or maybe you're jumping into youth ministry as you prepare for the 2025 youth gathering. We want to help you. And so we're kicking off a second series of podcasts designed to jumpstart for anyone who is new to youth ministry or is looking for a reminder on planning and best practices.
We know that most of these people doing youth ministry are volunteers who are busy and often don't have a lot of specialized youth ministry training. We wanted youth leaders to be able to think about key logistics and program development as you develop healthy youth ministry. You can come back and listen to these anytime or send them to someone who is just getting started.
So we're going to start this series by talking about communication. You can make an amazing plan of programming, Bible study, and more, but if your youth and their parents don't know about it, then it really isn't going to work for you. I know that one of my reoccurring panic dreams as a DC in the congregation was that everything was set up, all the decorations, all the volunteers were in place, and I realized that I have not publicized it anywhere, and there are no kids coming.
All that work for nothing.
All that work for nothing, right? So we're going to make sure that doesn't happen to you, because communication is key, and we want to go through some baseline pieces that'll help you communicate and create a communication plan that'll work for you.
Joining us to talk about how to communicate is Meredith Smith, our communication specialist for LCMS Youth Ministry. Meredith helps us communicate about everything we do in LCMS Youth Ministry, including the gathering. She is a Houston native, a graduate of Texas A&M, go Aggies, and is married to Alex. Welcome to the podcast again. Great to have you.
Thanks, guys.
So we got to hear about you briefly in the intro, but maybe if people are listening to this as a first-timer to the podcast, give us a reminder a bit about you, your vocations, your role in youth ministry, and things that bring you joy.
Sure. I've been married to my husband, Alex, for 2.5 years now, and he teaches theology and social studies at Lutheran South here in St. Louis. My biggest fan and source of encouragement. I'm also a daughter, a sister, and in the last 18 months, the most proud aunt you will ever meet.
No, you and I fight over that.
I am really type A, so I love planning things. So this job is actually really great for me. I really love planning vacations, so I'll have like an 8-page Google Doc for a 4-day trip. So in some way, shape, or form, I'm always planning something that Alex may or may not know about. And of course, I love communication things, and I've been serving in communication roles since 2015, and I've obviously learned a lot in that time frame, and I'm excited to share with you guys.
Awesome. So what do you love about communicating on a big scale about the LCMS Youth Gathering or LCMS Youth Ministry?
With such a wide audience, you can imagine there's a lot of learning styles in our group of people. Sometimes it's fun because it allows me or us as a team to use a variety of different communication tactics. We've been able to use social media, videos, things like End Goals podcasts to communicate all things youth ministry. It's also fun to stretch my communication knowledge and try new things. You guys are really good at letting me try whatever I want to try. And it's fun to get connected with other people in our synod that are doing communication in their congregations and their other vocations. The people that serve on the Gathering Media team are some of my closest friends and some of the most talented people I've ever met, and I love learning from them and seeing how they serve in their unique ways to serve young people in our church. You also can't beat getting to an event like the Gathering and people show up. One, they have all their stuff. Yeah. They've got there, so I have done my job of communicating something clearly to them.
Yeah.
So
sure.
The nightmare has never come true for you then, that you've done all this planning for the youth gathering and no one showed up.
No one showed up.
Because we forgot to open registration or
I
forgot
did
to communicate.
have a nightmare one time that I forgot to order the guidebooks for the gathering. So that was terrifying.
Yeah. No. So we wanted to bring you on mostly because you just have a huge level of expertise when it comes to communication. And we know as a youth leader is starting to get into that, maybe they're just stepping into that role for the first time. Not only are they going to start to think about what that's going to be on the calendar, what Bible studies they're going to use, but one of the first things they're going to need to do is to make a communication plan. So as they think about what that plan should look like, where would you have them start?
First of all, having a plan is extremely crucial to anything. That is the first and foremost. The plan is going to help you, the communicator, and help those you're communicating with, so your youth and your families. And a good place to start is to maybe evaluate all the places that you could communicate with your youth and families. You might find it helpful to start looking at what your congregation already offers, so a monthly newsletter, an email, the bulletin, a bulletin board, social media. And once you know what you already have available, you can leverage your communication efforts through some of those means, or you can look at how you can expand those efforts to make more effective communication for your youth and their families. Another great way to, if you're starting to look at what you want to do differently, just send a survey out to your youth and adults, and you might find it helpful to see how they want to connect with you and how they prefer to receive information. So a simple survey with just some options can help you see the differences between your youth and adult communication, because I guarantee they are not the same. And just remember, don't list any communication that you are not willing to do. So if you do not want to do Snapchat, don't even list it as an option. But you should be willing to step into those, step out of your comfort zone and try some of those new things to get communication out to youth and their families. And Julianna, you talked about events and working towards getting people to sign up and volunteer and trained. And a lot of churches have their standard events that they do. They do youth nights every Wednesday, or they do a Christmas program every December. So once you know what you need to communicate with your youth and their parents, you can start looking at those events and the deadlines that might be helpful for your youth and their families. And you know your audience best. You know how your audience receives things, if they are last-minute signer-uppers or if they are on the ball and signing up the second the link drops. So make sure you know that about your audience. Work backwards from your event and use what works best for you guys. And it's especially helpful if for these events that happen regularly, and you can know your audience a little bit better.
And I think sometimes when you're working backwards, you realize just how early you have to start that communication process.
I feel like it's earlier and earlier every year.
It's the communications earlier and earlier, but like you said, you may not get the registrations until later and later. It's interesting kind of finding that good mix to communicate the information you need to, but then being patient sometimes in that process too. So as you can imagine, Meredith has some wonderful calendars that she keeps all these things organized. It's fantastic of keeping us on track, and so many things that play into that. And a lot of communication now too certainly happens through social media. So like when you're asking about those platforms and things, or through our phones, through apps and other things. Meredith, what are some of the best practices you would give for using social media to communicate?
So much of the communications happens on our phones. It's just like the norm now. We just sit and scroll endlessly. So if you're planning on using social media, make sure that no one is excluded. There are some young people that don't have Instagram or TikTok. So you want to make sure that those youth are still finding out the information even if they don't have social media. And it's fun to find something unique to do in your plan. At my previous congregations, we would celebrate like the big events like confirmations, graduations, birthdays, or if kids won awards at school. So something like that is unique and it's fun. It's a little bit more personal than just kind of like a static announcement. And you should use features that are available to you on social media. Think of things like sharing reels, or Instagram has polls or questions. And you can also put like links in bio. So it's just really easy for people to get that communication. And it's a unique way to get people engaged. And the other thing, which is crazy because you're asking me about social media, I say don't solely rely on social media unless you fully understand the algorithm, which the second you do, it's going to change the next day. Be prepared to communicate in a lot of different ways and multiple times.
So, I mean, when I started out as DC, I'm going to age myself. I guess I was a college intern who was still doing kind of a monthly newsletter where I copied and pasted clip art out of a book, right? That was good. How often should somebody be maybe posting on a social media, or does it depend on the platform?
It's really going to depend on the platform. And like I said, like the algorithm, you could post now on Instagram. I'm seeing posts from like 4 days ago, just today. So it really is in the hands of the algorithm. But if you have the ability and you want to post multiple times a week, I always say like more is better. If you could do that, or have somebody in your youth group do that.
It's a great ways. I mean, you see groups, we do it. I know in our youth ministry, different pieces too, sharing God's word, encouragement. I mean, so there is a lot that you can do that just put that in the before young people and adults who care for them too. Just to be in the scriptures together, and those prayer requests too that come up that can be so important. So love how that all comes together through social media.
Yeah. And that could probably be a podcast all of its own.
Right.
It's just how to use social media. But yeah, certainly you want to use whatever platform you can be most consistent on, right?
Right.
And those kinds of things. So as you're thinking not just about social media, but all the different ways we communicate, what are some of the problematic things you see ministry leaders do that might hinder their communication?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest obstacles that I've seen and I've had to learn in communication is what I call like leader language in quotes, or using some sort of internal language that not everybody's going to understand. For example, in my previous conversation, a sentence that I would have said is, I'm going to film the ECCMOI in the CMC. And
what now?
That means nothing to anybody except for me and the people I was working with. So it can get really confusing, especially if you have people who maybe don't attend regularly.
Right.
So you want to make sure as much as possible that you're communicating clearly using language that youth understand, the parents understand, again, especially for those that aren't heavily involved. And also don't forget to try and communicate without confusing people or upsetting people or offending anyone.
So when I'm putting together something, is it helpful then to like have somebody else read it?
Yes. Having other eyes on it is super helpful because we get so caught up in our just internal language that you just kind of forget that not everybody knows what you're talking about.
Right. Or like, I'll write something and send it to you and you'll go like, Julianna, you missed the dates, right? Or like, what time is this happening? Or like, if there's like, sometimes we forget that there's like, if there's a mission critical thing you need them to do, they need to be wearing clothes they can get messy in.
Sure.
Or whether you're feeding them or not.
Sure.
Right. How are they getting from here to there? If we're going to some other event, are we meeting there? Are we meeting at church? Those kinds of things. Often as leaders, we can get stuck in our own heads about those things and forget to communicate them consistently in all of those different ways.
Yeah, I love this where some of those templates can come in handy too, or having those other people like, or once you get a good piece of communication, like you hold on to that to like be able to go and kind of reproduce it because like it had all the information in it, I remembered it. Right. And then make sure you do that again, because I think like you said, that consistency can be such huge ways to get it to your different audiences that way, which is great.
Well, and I've done it before where you accidentally, like if some information shifts and then all of a sudden the second or third communication has different information. Right. Am I highlighting it? Right. Am I saying that is different? Or are people going to be confused because, is this happening on Tuesday or Thursday? You said it was happening this other day, right? So making sure you're consistent.
It's okay to make mistakes. How many times have you received something from a marketer that was like, oh, it's actually this. This is the link you need to click on. So don't be afraid to make mistakes, but they're inevitable sometimes.
Well, we know that people are getting emails and texts and scrolling social media virtually all day long, it seems like. So there can be a lot of voices that are being heard and listened to by a wide variety of people. With all that information, what are some ways you would suggest to catch people's attention?
Yeah, we are constantly being marketed to by companies. It's really easy to get lost in the scroll. And I personally, my biggest thing is I would talk to the youth in your congregation and find out what they like to see on social media, what catches their eyes, and be willing to meet them there and to do those silly videos, but make them informative. And if their suggestions sound out of your comfort zone, find ways to get them involved to do it. My previous congregation had a youth leadership team, and they were always excited to jump in on that and go with the trends of whatever was being trendy, because I was not going to do a TikTok dance. But they were more than willing to do that and get that information out to their friends that way.
We have talked about a little bit internally as a staff, and I think it might be helpful for other people to think about, like, it's helpful to use pictures, right?
Sure.
Right? Or videos if we can. If I'm maybe using a picture, what might I be looking for and what kind of picture I might use for our event?
Oh, man. I would use pictures of your congregation as much as you can, pictures from your event as much as you can. There's a number of stock photo websites that have free stock photos out there. If you really needed to use something in particular, Canva, I know in our office, we talk about Canva a lot, and there's a lot of, if you want to do stock images there, or if you want to just have some cool graphics with some movement, any of those things I feel like are pretty effective on social media.
And looking for, energy and excitement, right?
Yeah.
But I also think that sometimes we think, oh, that stock photo looks really good. But when our kids are scrolling, it looks like an ad.
Yeah.
Just like everything else. And so using their own pictures, your own
They love
church,
seeing themselves on
even
social
if
media.
it's not as high quality, right? Still, and then being able to post afterwards your pictures and share that with folks. Well, you just talked a little bit about Canva. We know that people are going to be doing this communication as a volunteer. They're not going to have nearly as much time as maybe you or I would in terms of putting together communications. What are some tools they might use to help facilitate that process to make it a little easier for themselves?
Yeah, social media has come a long way in the last couple of years, making it pretty easy for people just step into those roles and get social media posted out there. Things like Instagram and Facebook all have a scheduling. If you have a business quote unquote page, you can go in there and you can schedule to your heart's desire. If you just have like a day or a couple hours to go in, make some things on Canva and schedule those out, then you don't have to worry about it. I have found those tools really, really helpful. If your church has a communications budget, there's a number of tools out there too, but there is certainly some really great free stuff through Facebook and Instagram.
Julianna mentioned before about, yes, information changes. And so trying to help people manage maybe multiple emails with different information. What do you say about where do you go to, where is the one place that has the most up-to-date information? How do you keep people tied to that location where the best information is going to be?
I would encourage people to make sure your church or your congregation's website is up to date with the most accurate information. That is a place that you can just send people the link. They can click on it and they can get the most up to date, whether that's the homepage or there's a lot of just static landing pages you can do, or maybe it's the church calendar, but something that they can always point to for the most up to date information. And that's easy for you to send out and to even say verbally to people to go visit.
Yeah. So I know you've talked to us in the media team for the gathering about how to tell a compelling story, right? Because that's really what communication is, right? Not just the dates and the times, but trying to tell the story. So what are some things youth leaders should know about helping to tell the story of their ministry or the programming?
Telling stories is super powerful, and it's really engaging when people can see themselves or something that they've been a part of on social media. They're encouraging, impactful, informative, and everybody loves a good story, even on social media. So through the gathering, we really try and tell a lot of stories of the event. So we use a model that we look at as like a funnel, with the top of the funnel being the most broad that we could possibly be. So, for example, in the gathering, that is the gathering as a whole. What are we doing at this event? Why are there thousands and thousands of young people gathered together? If you're looking at your group, you might consider you're looking at your whole congregation, or maybe it's your whole town or your neighborhood, and just think of the most broad audience that you can think of. Moving down the funnel, we get a little bit more personal. So, for example, for the gathering, our next level down would be to look at an individual congregation that's attending the gathering. What is their experience at the gathering? How did they play into the story of the whole gathering itself? And what does that look like for the event in general? If you're looking at your own congregation, that's where you can start looking at your group or just a smaller segment of your congregation. If we go down to the very last level, is the most personal level for the gathering, we're looking at an individual that is attending the gathering. How does their story fit into the overall gathering story and in their congregation, and how that affects and how impactful that is for us to read. We call that like our humans of the gathering, and it's just really fun to get to sit down and interview people that you might not normally get to interview for your congregation. That could just be one youth in your congregation, and telling their story about how they fit into not only your group but also your congregation as a whole. We like to think it's a really easy way to look at telling stories, whether it's through photo or through video, looking at it like a funnel for those special events in your congregations, or telling a story of hosting fundraisers or why your group is going to the gathering or a servant event or anything like that. It's just a really easy way to tell a big story in a small way.
Right. So alongside telling kind of the bigger story of what's going on in your program, which you still want to do,
right.
Being able to parse it down to what's happening for one young person. And then it's also a great way for the congregation to get to know that young person, know their name, know their face, hear about them a little bit more.
In most congregations should have a mission statement that everybody in the congregation is striving to live up to or to complete. So showing how your youth are living out that mission statement through their various vocations or through your youth ministry is pretty powerful.
I love telling that story too. Like, especially it seems like maybe around the gathering, but even LCMS servant events or other things that are happening on. It's amazing how many articles will get sent that are like in a local newspaper from an LCMS church about like cool things their youth are doing. I think, like you said, newspapers are looking for those often positive stories of young people doing things in service, or they're doing this work to go to an event, or they're just opening the doors of the church to do some mission work or something like that. And so like just telling that positive story, connecting with the local newspaper too. You get to tell your story, you get to talk about the gospel, all that Christ has done for us. And so like, just some neat things and exposure that can happen out into your community too by telling those stories.
Yeah, there's so much negative stuff in the news.
It's
a good opportunity for congregations.
Might be surprised the newspaper might want to come cover.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier that idea of like you used a youth leadership team to help you with communications. How might you get youth involved in helping communicate about your youth ministry?
Yeah, sitting down and talking with people, word of mouth is probably the best marketing tool there ever is and ever will be. So getting down to talk to the youth in your congregation and their parents to reiterate why it's really important that they are helping you communicate with them so they can have a seamless experience for all of your youth ministry activities. Again, I really liked the youth leadership team. They were always really excited to jump in and help, and they talk to their friends more than I talk to their friends, and they know whatever the lingo is, whatever is cool. And sometimes those peers are more willing to listen to their other peers versus an adult telling them what to do. So I always really appreciated having some youth leadership team members helping me out, getting things going like that.
Yeah, I think when we do Youth Lead, we have this executive team, and they help me with the social media that we do. And I've done this in my congregations too. And one, I think the posts that they suggest tend to do better than anything I imagine, right? Because they know what they're going to be interested in. But then also, I think there's a real comfort and encouragement to other youth when you have youth leaders who are sharing event information on their own personal media, right? When they're reposting, resharing, those kinds of things, they're like, oh, okay, well, I think I know who's going to be there. That can be a great encouragement to be able to do that. So saying like, hey, if you guys are going to be there, make sure that you're encouraging other people to come by reposting, resharing those things, putting it on their own stories on Instagram and that kind of thing.
And they really take ownership if they're the ones that created it. They're really excited to share it because they made it or they did it. Which is always just fun to see.
Or the pictures of them, right? Like, honestly, it goes back to those picture things, right? If the picture of the video is them, they're more likely to get that and get that added engagement that you're going to have with their friends.
Absolutely. So, Meredith, just talking specifically about the youth gathering, what are some tools and resources that youth leaders can grab off the website or other things, or things that'll be coming that'll help them communicate about the gathering itself?
We keep the Gathering website updated as much as possible with resources for adult leaders to communicate, maybe have those Bible studies and inform their parents of before they send their youth on to the gathering. We also have lots of frequently asked questions that we try and update as much as we get those questions to make sure that you have all the answers you need to prepare your group to attend the gathering. We also update our social media regularly. So if you are on any social media platform, you can find us at LCMS Gathering. And we also have a youth ministry Facebook group. So for anybody that is on Facebook and wants to connect with the youth ministry staff or connect with other adult leaders, especially if you're a first-time adult leader, we encourage you to join that Facebook group and get connected with some of those other adult leaders in that group. For this gathering, we're also going to be hosting gathering update Zooms, so you can come and talk to Julianna and Mark and I once a month, second Thursday of every month, leading up to the gathering starting in January of 2024. And we're going to offer different topics to talk about gathering planning and what that looks like for your group, but also have gathering office hours so you can come and talk to us and ask any of those pertinent questions that you have to get your group best prepared for the gathering. For groups that are attending the gathering, they can download the Gathering Media Kit found on the Gathering website. This has those Canva templates that we were talking about earlier. It also has some editable posters that you can use to put around your congregation's campus, as well as download the Gathering logo for all of your T-shirts that we love to see at the gathering.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Thanks for all your expertise and all your work, all the work of the media team. Awesome to see. And thanks so much for giving us such a good basis to start talking about communication, start getting out the good word about the gathering, but also so many things that take place in youth ministry. So thanks for all your work.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So we're going to continue this series. We've done one of these already, the starter pack. So you can go back and listen to those episodes. Again, we're going to link them in the show notes. But this will be the start of another series of these to help you as you get ready and get started in your youth ministry. Just to maybe a refresher course for those of you that have been doing it for a while. A reminder on some tips and tools that we can have as we communicate well with our young people and their parents. So a couple of closing questions for you to consider. What is your plan for communicating upcoming programming to your youth ministry?
What is one additional tool you can add to your communications tool belt?
And how can you engage young leaders in helping with communication in your ministry? We will continue to keep you in our prayers as you care for young people and communicate well what is happening in your youth ministry.
End Goals Podcast is a production of LCMS Youth Ministry and KFUO Radio. To find out more about LCMS Youth Ministry or to find links to resources mentioned, go to kfuo.org/youth ministry. Thank you for listening and caring for the young people of our church.